And it's something which students of NGO like to do a lot, how local and international languages of humanitarianism cross-fertilize. And that's the spirit of Oxfam. That is what they've always tried to do in various ways. And for people like Bill Hine and the people who have worked with him, like Linda Ross, who was a permanent member of staff there for a long time, their credo was, if it has no local meaning, we can't do anything about it. So every time something came from outside, if Oxfam UK, Oxfam Canada sent some stuff about AIDS, about militarization, about global trade, they were always trying to find connections at home. Similarly, when people at home were asking to do something, what can we do? They were trying to find some good connections. So the spirit of that house, time and again, for people I interviewed, is nothing was impossible. We never said no. The house harbored, became a center for all sorts of people. They even harbored cooperative for preparing your funerals. So there was one phone, and they said we never knew who would be calling. And there was one postal box which was used by all sorts of community groups. So every time they were trying to bring these community groups to have a global outreach, and similarly encouraging, making sure that global campaigns had a local meaning. So then, what happened first in Oxfam is a link between fishermen there and fishermen abroad. In the early 70s, when these people were starting, and that's the meeting that Lauren had been coaxed into going to, there were people who were coming to St. John's to speak about inequality of trade around the meetings of GATT. People from Toronto, they were called GATTfly, they had workshops everywhere. And by a lot of work, the people of Oxfam brought fishermen's unions to that meeting. It took a lot of convincing. They had no idea where they should go and listen to that. But there, the local connections, the friendships, the families, the closeness of the community might have helped. And this was, as you know, a time when fisheries and even mining operations in Newfoundland were closing at a rapid pace. Bill, who had just arrived there, saying what I was looking at was the largest layoff in the country. So what that meeting was, and that's a bit, every NGO has that, a kind of mythological moment, and these little tales that they say again and again and again, which you could say they're not true, are they true or not, but what's more interesting, like the foundational myth of Amnesty International apparently is completely wrong. There's a good article by a colleague of mine that cannot absolutely not retrace that story in the newspaper. But then what he says is that the story has a life of itself. The reason why it continues is important. I'm not saying at all this one is not true, it's true, I've got the posters to show you, but it's also got a life which goes way beyond that story. Anyway, St. John's, the people from Toronto, inequality of trade in the world, and these fishermen who would have liked to do something else on their weekend, and the aha moment. They started the moment where they say, well, that's what's happening here, right? It's exactly the same thing. We don't have to talk about Africa, we don't have to talk about Latin America, or if we do, we can tell you it's exactly what's happening here. Why should we talk about these people when we have the exact same problems of uneven global trade here? And instead of, so that their impatience with this was converted into solidarity. And it led to this theater play. What's that got to do with the price of fish? Which is what a woman who was there at that meeting said, why should I care about Africa and Latin America? What's that got to do with the price of fish? Which is what bothers me. And the question remained, and it became a play, and it toured, and it was the beginning of a long, long tradition of connections. And here, I told you about academic churches, students, anti-poverty group, then other traditions are feeding it. So then the fishermen's unions and the fishermen's energy is feeding into all this. So Bill helped to put together this poster about global fisheries, which circulated in Oxfam, Canada, which was on the wall of his office, which was also, before the internet, before the kind of communications we're having now, the main way to communicate ideas like this and to educate. There was also press releases from the Fishermen's Union when visitors from abroad came. With the help of Oxfam Canada, fishermen from abroad came to visit Canada. They would stop by, the union would welcome them, and the union shipped people away and sent gears to fishermen in Nicaragua. And one of the extraordinary tales of Oxfam, Newfoundland, is that of a young fisherman who went south, helped over there, drowned, and who had become one of them, who became over there, who had the funeral of a hero of their own political struggle, and whose family, who was mad at Oxfam at first for what had happened, realized the importance of their work when the people then came over to Newfoundland to speak about the importance of what he had done. So that sad moment is also remembered for the extraordinary meaning that that collaboration had on both sides of the exchange. Soon enough, the outreach, international people of the main trade union of the island ask, what can we do? And it's Oxfam, this is one of the albums that burnt, and these are fishing people involved in the program. And here, visitors from Chile that are hosted by Oxfam. So the next one is trade unions in general. It's Oxfam that helped to team up the main trade union of the island with Namibia, and there was a Namibia program of exchange, and the outreach people were involved in involving their members into work with Africa. And at one point, an impatient newspaper, at one point when NAPE started striking, said NAPE is striking and their leader is in Namibia, as if he was, careless and traveling around. But that did not stick, but they tried to make a scandal out of it anyway. And and this is one lady who came from Namibia to travel the island to speak about the problems of her country, and was welcomed by the network of Oxfam and trade union supporters. Another fantastic story of global and local is that of Linda Roth, who worked with Bill for the longest time and is now working in the provincial unit responsible for the status of women. So up to about 5 years ago, she was the main administrator, and she'd been doing that for more than 2 decades. Linda came from a QSO tradition, the university voluntary workers, 3 years of that in Southern Africa, and she, when she came back and she married a Newfoundlander, she wanted to carry on doing something, and Oxfam was the something. It was there, so she did voluntary work. I needed to talk about it, so she went there, talked about it, and then got a job there when a job opened. And she was, when she came back, studying medicine, left medicine, gravitated around health things. So when she was hired for Oxfam as an administrator, the health part of it, became much more interesting. So she very quickly, when health issues came from the newspapers or the main office or Oxfam UK, she was the one that was trying to do what Bill was talking about, to make that a local issue. And it was always, they both say that, everybody says that they're a question of legitimacy. If we want to be understood and efficient, we need to do stuff that is seen as representing the place and as coming from the place. And that was always sine qua non, and some causes were not adopted for that. And the very structure of governance of Oxfam Newfoundland was based on that. The people who were on the board really had a sense that they were representing the community, and then when they went to the regional meetings in Halifax and the national meeting in Ottawa, there was always the sense that they were representing that community. So Linda, this is a young Linda, in one of the scrapbooks also took photos out, traveled all around the island to lecture about global poverty, bring some of these posters, some of the toolkits they were doing, but also did a lot of work with local associations of nurses. It's with them that they organized a whole campaign against bad pharmaceuticals, against bad baby food, and boycotted carnation milk, and became involved in campaigns for breastfeeding and all that. So the nurses' unions were very involved in that too. They put together this extraordinary kit on World Health that's done by St. John's Oxfam Committee. It's a booklet that speaks about bad drugs, very actual topics, very well researched. This is where her expertise and her connections are showing. I should stop there. And that they traveled with that, and they distributed that to teachers as well. When the AIDS epidemic started, and the news of that started to circulate, the tack that Newfoundland took up that was very particular. Newfoundland had the highest rate of infection in Canada, and it was heterosexual people who were infected, more than homosexual people. So the campaign was very, for that, the resonance of the problem there was very important. A lot of it came from workers who were going to work outside of Newfoundland and came back to the island and infected their wives and the members of the other thing is that it was very rural as opposed to other places in Canada, because they came back in rural community and in small communities. There was infection rates that were very high there, and a lot of shame associated with that. And through that peculiarity, there was a lot of connections between what they were reading and what was happening in Africa and what was happening home. So there were African people who came to Newfoundland and found there a lot of resonance, a lot of similarities, who were interested in seeing how things were going on there. And one of the important things that they saw very quickly is some women were HIV infected and were alive, right? That was very important things because they had access to medication more than they had in Africa. And some infected women from here went to Southern Africa as well, and a whole network of information and advocacy was started. And with Jim McKinnon, who was responsible for Southern Africa at the main office, they invited the Puppets Against AIDS, a troupe of puppeteers and health education workers, to come over. They toured the whole country. One of the things we took a picture of was one of the puppets. They also, in Newfoundland, did much more than that. They had workshops of making puppets. They brought all that to northern Newfoundland and Labrador communities. There is a film that came out of that as well, which is, I think, available on YouTube. And so there were this extraordinary week of workshop where Innu and First Nation young people teamed up with rural people in an old school in northern Newfoundland to make these puppets and discuss questions of sexual health. This is a spread in the newspaper about their experiment. It was very well publicized. School teachers were another very important constituency, and I'll speak about their week of education in a minute. But these are posters that were produced with the Association of School Teachers, how some of these faraway wars had very hard consequences for teachers. Okay, let me speak about the place. Now, the two people in the interview I had in Indian restaurant, I also still talking about, was with Kelly Bruton, who made her way to the National Council for quite a lot of years, and Beverly Brown, who probably embodied, that's why Bill had me meet them. I could have met all sorts of other peoples, but I was not there for long enough. The voluntary local energy of the city. Kelly is an artist. At that time, she was helping to shoot a film. She was responsible for all the sets. And Beverly Brown is an anti-poverty activist, a social worker who was involved in Toronto in very heavy work of psychiatrical social work, came to Newfoundland and was involved for the longest time in movements against poverty, and was always close to the Oxfam house. What is interesting to see with the story of these two ladies is that the very nature of their local action and then the very nature of their global action is very much dependent on what they were doing locally. So Kelly had been on an exchange when she was young for 3 years, I think, in Namibia. And when she came back, the same thing as Linda Ross, she wanted to do something. She was an artist, and she went straight to Oxfam House. And what can I do? And so did Beverly in her way. So first, she helped put together the Christmas float as an artist, right? And they won the prize, the best float. And she did that for many years in the name of Oxfam. And then she did something which was much more complicated. Whole project called Weaving from the Heart, where she involved the whole guild of local weaver. That's a series of pictures that they took there into weaving to raise money, to auction the fabric and to raise money for a project for women and seeds and agriculture that Oxfam connected them with. And they also had another project where they built this immense kilt where everybody could come to the local guild, and the patterns were cut already and could sew them and everything, and the children could do some drawings in the meantime. And that was all connected to that place in Southern Africa where women would, it would be used for women's kindergarten over there, their seeds and their agriculture. And Kelly and her friend from the guilds actually traveled there on their own money, saw that the drawings that the children had done when their mom and dad were doing the kilt were all over the kindergarten walls, and have very moving stories and pictures which they still have in their own home, and we took the pictures of some of these pictures in their scrapbook doing this. This is also the making of the kilt, documented in the newspaper. This is this is the kind of things they also did, helping local people to produce a record and a song, the kind of thing that Linda and Bill pride themselves saying, we never said no, we always tried to support these things. This is the last one I want to talk before I speak about transformation. John Green, who has tons of papers of Oxfam. A lot of the stuff that might have been lost in the house is in John's CDs, and because it was part of the board. John was an educator. He was also an NDP leader at the time. He was a member of the militia, military guy as well. He always, his military background helps for his organization. He's indeed very, very organized. And John did a lot to link the teachers' union to Oxfam and for work of education. So Oxfam St. John's was producing every year these resource kits, third world chain resource kits. And there's a lot of students apparently who still, older people who still nowadays say that their aha moment was his classes when he was talking about these things. But these made their way to the meetings of the teachers' unions and to many, many classrooms, and were produced every year. Also, at a time when they were trying a bit later in the 90s to try to rekindle students' interest, they had workshops at City Hall for students of each high school, which led to projects in their own school. And this is one of the pictures Bill took of one of these projects. one of their projects were rewarded. And here I'd like to speak about transformations. This is a nice thing. It was on the wall of the house, and it's when they celebrated their own 25th anniversary. So that, wish to commemorate and celebrate is there important, and then they dug out some old documents and everything to do this on their own. So one of the things I told you about, which is very interesting for us, is how these institutions go through different times, how malleable they are and adaptable. And one of the questions that is very interesting is, why is it that the kind of golden moment of solidarity with South Africa and Latin America, petered out? And one of the almost simplistic answers to that is that these apartheid was finished and the dictatorships of Latin America were not so bad anymore. So the movements of solidarity had to be rethought. They didn't have the same sense of urgency. And there is also the question of changes of the changing staff of the organization. How many people were there? Who was there? And there was also there a golden age, which was very much the product of the availability of federal government money, which is no more with us, where you could easily have funds, some ad hoc projects, and some semi-long-term employees to do all sorts of things with the money mainly of SIDA. The national politics, the vagaries of national politics, therefore, are very important. And it's interesting to ask how the efforts that were there are redirected, what happens of them. So Bill Hine, for instance, remained. A lot of people went, but as he remained, a lot of his work became more national work, and he became a designer of campaigns for more than just Newfoundland. And when we were there, he gave us some extra posters that might now be the only poster remaining, but so he was very proud of that one because it was double-sided. After that, I did a double-sided poster for my department. So that's apparently the nasty version, and the milder version, the one for Oxfam and the one for SIDA, that they produced that way. And then some of these campaigns were national, and Bill's, maybe you could argue, is the vitality of what they were doing over there came to feed the national program even more so in a time of stringency. And so that's eventually some of these things became part of Oxfam International, and that's a campaign that Bill was part of, which he was particularly proud of, which also involves some of the very famous St. John's humorists who gave their time and their studio time to national advocacy. That one is about international inequalities in the making of clothes, a topic which was burning really at the time when I visited because of what happened in the factories of Bangladesh. So there what you see is a picture of making poverty history a national campaign, and the tack that they took in St. John's on Signal Hill to go and see the sunrise and to take this marvelous picture and gather a lot of people. I shouldn't talk about this. This is what they did locally by gathering. They would go in high school and people would cut the tag of their own clothes and put them there and reflect on which was the company who was doing what and was the trade ethical. And these are other kinds of campaigns that made their way, that crisscross the national and the local level. So just to finish, I wanted to talk about the impacts of St. John's. I mean, there are magnificent tales. When Mandela came to Canada for the first time, the media said he landed in Ottawa, but he landed in St. John's first. And the reason why he landed in St. John's was for refueling, and it could have been nothing. but because everybody knew everybody, there was the Southern African doctor who knew the custom officers, and all that was hush-hush, but finally a lot of people knew. And they went, and then they let the Oxfam people go to the shed, and a Southern African black fellow who had been a victim of apartheid, who was working for them, wrote a note that he gave to the guy of the plane company, that he gave to Mandela. Mandela saw the note come out and came to talk to them. And the picture of that is still in the office of that fellow who now I think works for the municipality. But there are moments like that that show that this local energy led to extraordinary things. And there is a lot, I haven't even started to see what Newfoundland looks like in the National Archives. There's loads of Newfoundland files there, but the synergy and the creativity of the peoples over there transpired in many national campaigns. It is a difficult time at the moment, and there was a lot of angry people when I went there who did not want the offices to close, who thought that they had not been told that the office would close and that they should have had a thing to say about that, like the sisters of the presentation. There was a lot of anxiety about the future of all these energies, but there's also this extraordinary fact that that a lot of the people who are now everywhere in municipal politics, in national politics, in the health minister of Tobin, and on and on and on, started working at Oxfam House. And back in the plane there, when we were on our way back, Elsa was saying it looks like a heaven of egalitarianism and solidarity. And it's true. I'm just for the, because of all these myths and in these stories over there, it's partly true. Is that although there is a lot of tension and bitterness around the local place, there is also an extraordinary influence of that institutions, whatever the future would be. So I thank you very much for your attention, and I hope that you'll be able to help me to carry on going. Thank you.
Dominique, thank you so much. You've given us lots to think about in terms of different traditions, different ways of understanding history. We're a small group, so open for discussion, comment, questions, conversation.
This is a question probably more for Susan than for you, Dominique.
You should say reward.
Ricky Stewart.
You used to be the
Executive Director of Oxfam, one of four distinguished ex-EDs and EDs here. One of the things that is happening right now is that in Canada is that the definition of what is philanthropy and charity is being contested by Revenue Canada. And it's very clear one of the examples is that relief of poverty is eligible for charitable status under Revenue Canada, but preventing poverty or ending poverty is not charitable. And one of the things that's so striking in the story that Dominique has told is that distinction, that people were drawn to Oxfam and have been and continue to be, because it is not a charity in that sense of Lady Bountiful, giving to the poor so that they will not starve today. Tomorrow maybe, but not today. And I'm wondering to what extent, how your program and Dominique's research as part of that frames this question of philanthropy or charity. Because Canada right now it lags way behind in any kind of a global context compared to Europeans or even Americans. So I'd really
First of all, we take philanthropy in a very broad sense of the definition we like to use is the use of private resources for public purposes. So we start with charitable giving, but giving is only one part.